Greetings. My name is Amber Smith, and on behalf of Evolving in Education, I want to welcome you and thank you for joining. Today's date is September 20th, 2023, and this is our Evolving in Education Childhood Education / Curriculum Focus Group meeting. Today we have a special guest speaker, Elvera DiBrigit. She's going to be talking to us about the book which she co-authored, an international best-selling book called No Problem Parenting, as well as the really cool approach she's developed towards educating, which is, she calls it Waldorfstory. And she's going to talk a little bit about positive intelligence and whatever else she would like to touch on. All right, Elvira, thank you so much for joining. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here. It's just so fun to talk about these subjects that need to be shared more, I feel like. So I'll just share a little bit about my journey. Oh, here we have someone joining in. I was studying as a college student and working in childcare. And so for one of my classes, I had to go and look at some different schools, and I chose to go to the Davis Waldorf School. And that was really my first time being in a Waldorf school. And in the aftercare part of it that I was staying for, I just saw it was so different from the other childcare experiences that I had seen of after school care. The kids were playing with all these natural materials, and they were like just free to really make up their own make-believe games. And the teacher was, kind of interacting with that. And in a way of kind of being part of the make-believe game. So that was my first experience. And it just really was so remarkably different from my other experiences with education that I was really struck by it and said, I want to study Waldorf education. So that's what I did after college. Actually went and did a regular teacher training first, and thought, well, I'll just like combine my Waldorf in there in a regular school because I wanted to bring it into a regular school. But then got pregnant, had my own kids, and life's journey took me in different ways. But I ended up homeschooling Waldorf as the main bulk of time that I've spent with Waldorf. I have taught in the classroom in different Waldorf schools and in public education. And then when my kids were, I don't know, like in middle school or something, and I started looking again at working outside of the home, I worked in a Montessori school. And so from having those two experiences, I just sort of found ways that they could be combined, because Waldorf, when I think of Waldorf, and the easiest way to explain it to someone is it's an education that's all based on the arts. And not only, just like using the arts of like drawing and painting and singing and dancing in the curriculum, but also like having the teacher really think artistically about the curriculum and about the children. And so it's really steeped in this artistic, imaginative way of learning. And I often think that really relates a lot to Indigenous ways of teaching too, like storytelling and being in natural environments and using natural wood and, tools. That's a lot of what you'll see in a Waldorf classroom. And as I said, like these beautiful chalk drawings are part of it. And Montessori, on the other hand, I feel like the strength with Montessori is really having the student follow their interests and having a little more freedom to do that, and having these great manipulatives that, some of you, if you're familiar with Montessori, you might know, like the golden beads for counting. And then they'll have these beads on like little metal rows of 10. So you can count by tens. And then you can, just like math and geometry is what comes to mind, but they also with language, will use like cards with pictures and words to really just so much that the student can really get a hold of and learn through their senses. And I started playing around with combining both of those. And then I met this woman who she had done a lot of that herself. And I did a training through her called the New Learning Culture. And I should connect Carmen in with evolving education too, because that's a big theme of her life. I just found ways like with these manipulatives that are part of the Montessori to tell stories, and like a Waldorf type story that the teacher, would just create. There's no like set curriculum, and it's just like the teacher creating these stories. So that was part of the fun, was bringing together the arts with these great tools that Maria Montessori had started. And it works great, definitely for the lower grades is mostly where I have experimented with that. And I have been working with homeschool families for more than a decade. And these families are like free to choose any and all curriculum. And a lot of times I will just, share with them, little bits and pieces like, oh, you can, have math gnomes, which is a Waldorf type story and way of teaching math concepts, the 4 processes. And you can do, that story along with these beads that are part of the Montessori. So yeah, I'm not sure if I should keep going from here. I did want to just share, like just in the last year, what's evolved for me in my education is learning about positive intelligence, which is a way of thinking about mental fitness. But PQ is it stands for positive intelligence, just like we think about emotional intelligence. And before that, we had IQ, which is this like, trying to measure your intelligence, your ability to think logically. And so I feel like it's kind of like this whole evolution. Like first there was IQ, and then EQ. We realized how important emotional intelligence is. And now positive intelligence is this way of measuring how often your mental state is in a more positive frame and able to be focused and on task and not like stuck in some loop of negative feedback or just the normal like negativity bias that's part of our survival mechanism, right? But there's ways that we can, just by using a little like mindfulness moment, get back into a current, ready to learn frame of mind, which is why I think it's so valuable for educators to learn about this concept of positive intelligence, which is this man, Shirzad Shamin, has been studying it a lot, and he's been using it in, some of the big companies like Microsoft and Google, and training their executives there to build more positive teams. And it's all through individual work, really. I mean, eventually they get to how the team works together, but it's all through this idea of what's your mental fitness level? How much time do you spend, in these little negativity traps of thinking, or how can you switch and get into the sage perspective of like accepting what is and moving forward as best we can. I could share a lot more about that, but yeah, it's probably a good time to stop and take some questions.
Yes, thank you, Elvira. That is fascinating. I have a quick question about the positive IQ, and you sort of answered it already, but it's just so fascinating. Fascinating. I want to touch on it a little more. How do you see the future of education, or yes, how do you see the future of education evolving, especially in terms of incorporating holistic approaches like Waldorf and positive intelligence?
Mm, yeah. Well, a lot more movement and play and creativity in the classroom. Yeah. And I think one of the key things is how we assess learning. And I did get to go to a really cool conference last year that was put on by some different, like I know Lego was part of it, and Brain Pop, which is like an online learning platform. And there are people who are really trying to look at, new ways of assessing that's not just like the test or these computerized tests that we have now for students, but watching them in the classroom. And it's like, it's actually not new. It's the older ways, right, of assessing learning. And yeah, so I think that's a big key in terms of what I would see for the future of education is being able to assess the whole learner and um, and the whole environment too, of the learning environment.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And greetings, Sarah. Thank you for joining. I,
Yes.
I welcome you to introduce yourself and ask any questions, share anything you'd like to with us.
Hi, Amber. Yeah, I've been meaning to join for so long. I just found myself awake today. So it's 4:30 in the morning here,
Wow.
4:50 in the morning. Yeah. So yeah, I've nice to hear from you, Elvira. It's really positive thoughts coming out, and I've been in the learning industry for about over 20 years now. Started with corporate training at American Express, then eventually moved on to start my own consultancy. I've worked with American schooling as well, with companies like Compass Learning and Riverdeep to create courses for homeschoolers as well as the curriculum-based schooling environment. I've also worked with Australian schooling and schooling in the Middle East. But most of the bulk of my projects have been for corporations and organizational training. But I'm really interested in school training. I have two kids, and I've been experimenting with their learning as well. We started off looking at the Waldorf schools around here as well, but unfortunately, since India is a developing country, new ideas take some time to take off, and the Waldorf school that had opened nearby did not take off, unfortunately. So we then shifted to the unschooling method, and unschooling method was brilliant. Actually, I thought for about the first 2 weeks that the child was introduced to the school, they just let them roam around free, and they just kind of made a note of what the child was interested in and what they were avoiding, and then they based their yearly plan on that observation. And they also involved the parents a lot. So I loved that. I really wanted to be involved in my children's education, and they allowed me to do that. Um Unfortunately, that school also shut down uh, because, again, developing country, less people looking to do new things or experiment. I've finally got the kids into a international board school, which is IGCSE, and which will allow them to change it to IB in the senior grades. So I feel that gives them more opportunity as well later on. But like you were saying, being from the education industry and also having kids who are learning now in school, I see the need for we're following very archaic education systems, and we're not bringing in what really matters. Like you were saying, creativity is something that should be taught. Um, when we look at holistic learning, people forget to include the home. We talk about schools and what they should be doing. We don't really talk about what should be happening at home. Uh, I look at school as a supplementary or a supplement to home education. So what is not being done at school can be done at home. But if there is that coordinated effort between the parents and the schools, that works out just so much better.
Yeah, I think a
The
lot of
positive
the
thinking,
research supports that.
yes. I love the concept of that positive intelligence as well. Uh, because I've been working with the new generation, and a lot of the new generation has a nihilistic philosophy towards life, um,
Mm.
and that needs to be reversed. So, from working with people who are from older generations who are very positive, to working with the new generation who's very negative, that's a very important metric that should be brought into place. Yeah.
Mm.
So
Yeah,
at this
that's
time, I
a
don't have any questions,
interesting
but
observation.
Yes, that is very, thank you for sharing all that. And I follow an unschooling group on Facebook. That's very cool, that unschooling movement. Wow. So I have a couple more questions for you, Elvira. Um, as a co-author of Amazon best-selling book, No Problem, No Parenting, please share a bit about the book, the role you played in it, and any advice you'd like to share with us parents. Particularly, I'm asking because I have twin daughters, and I know you talk about the connection, so I'd like to hear that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so it's No Problem Parenting, and it's a really cool collaboration book that I got to work on. And so we each wrote a chapter, sorry. And Jackie Finneman, who was the lead on this, she kind of coined this no problem parenting, which there's like 4 steps to her like method about it, which is, I don't know if I can remember all the 4 steps off the top of my head, but it's, like connection and not just going at it like it's a problem right away, but trying to take a step back as a parent and use, some other ways instead of just thinking, oh, we have a problem. So that's what she means by no problem.
like look at things as opportunities. Do you mean looking at things as opportunities rather than?
Yes, exactly. And look, and that's a big part of the positive intelligence too. Looking at everything as like, well, what is the opportunity or the learning here? And yeah, so what I wrote about was about connecting with mothers and daughters, and I have outlined a few steps to that. But one of the things that I do is really help mothers to understand the whole hormonal cycle that women go through in a month and how that affects our everything, our energy and mood and skin, and also like what you need to eat and exercise levels that are good for certain parts of the month versus other parts. So there's just so much that because it's like a taboo subject for so long to even talk about menstruation or the differences between men and women, but there really is like this hormone cycle that works on a monthly cycle, whereas for men it's more a diurnal cycle, right, where it's just like morning and night, energy up and energy down. And it's not like that for women. So I really help mothers and daughters to connect through learning about that. And there's like 4 main cycles within a month. And it's kind of related to, or you can use the analogy of the 4 seasons of the year to understand this. And then by understanding ourselves better, then we can connect better with our children. So that's part of what my chapter was about in this book, No Problem Parenting. But yeah, it's just people, different parenting coaches from all over and all different focuses. So there's a lot of good gems in that book.
Fascinating. I can't wait to check it out. Thank you for joining, Jamal. Really quick, you had said something about the holistic education sort of starts at home, or how we leave out the whole family aspect. A big initiative of Evolving in Education is to bring families back into bring the whole family unit, involve them in the education. We're going to have family events, fun games, things like that, like seminars, etc., to engage the community, whether caregivers, parents, grandparents. We aim to bring everyone together. So Jamal, thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions for Elvera, she just introduced the book No Problem Parenting, as well as her cool approach, Waldorf, a combination of Montessori and Waldorf, as well as positive IQ. I also have another question, Elvera. How do you strike a balance between the Waldorf and Montessori principles in the Waldorf approach? And what benefits have you observed from this combination? I know you already touched on this, but I would love for Jamal to sort of hear it as well.
Yes. Yeah. Welcome, Jamal. Yeah. So can you wait, so say the question again? What are the
how do you strike a balance between the
Waldorf balance?
Yeah, and Montessori principles, and what benefits have you observed from this combination?
Yeah, well, I might be a little biased because I've spent more time and maybe have more familiarity with Waldorf. Affinity, maybe more than familiarity, I should say. But I feel like, just Waldorf can have maybe too much of like the creative that it's it's hard to say, like, how can you have too much creativity, but sometimes it just like needs something more anchoring. And I really like how Montessori, with its manipulatives, even this really cool Pythagorean puzzle that they put out in the preschool for the children to play with. And then by kindergarten, first grade, they're familiar with it. And then when they're learning about, Pythagorean theorem later, they have seen this and played with it so much that that's, just like maybe a lot easier for it to come into them as a theory, and I think that's both Montessori and Waldorf, like both Maria Montessori and Rudolf Steiner really wanted to take things, not out of the abstract, and really be able to reach the students where they are, and with the whole being, and through the senses and through experiential learning. And I feel like so they complement each other in a lot of ways. And then there's this balance of how much arts versus how much more like memorization, or matching these cards with words. Like probably there'd be a lot of Waldorf teachers who were like, oh no, that's too dry or whatever. But if you bring it with a story and you could let the kids draw their own cards, and there's just endless possibilities. So
Very cool.
yeah.
Thank you. Jamal, would you like to ask any questions or introduce yourself? I appreciate you joining, brother. Good to see you.
Sure. Yeah, great to see everybody. Thank you. I'm Jamal DePina, CTO of Evolving in Education. I just appreciate everyone being here and being able to share. Elvera, appreciate you sharing. Awesome. And good to
Yeah.
see you, Karen, dear.
So
Welcome.
I have another question of Elvera. I hope I'm not asking too many.
Yeah, that's great. I know you were prepared.
Yes, ma'am. In your experience, what are the key elements of a holistic and engaging learning environment for children, and how can parents and teachers create such an environment? So
Yeah, well, I do feel like, well, one of the things that I only have touched on a little bit here today is that, yeah, this emotional state of being is so important. There really is just so much more learning coming out about, the way our brain works and the way that, yeah, we can be blocked from learning just very easily by little stressors and big stressors, of course. And so I think that that's really key. This more training for teachers on how to do like trauma-informed education, how to be able to slow down and really meet someone where they're at and take time to let some, emotion filter through and give people space for that. Yeah. And that requires a lot to make that a priority rather than like, oh, we have to get this learning done, because the learning is not going to happen if you don't make a safe space the priority and meeting the individual needs for that safe space. And so there can be education around that. Like you can do it as a classroom too. And a lot of teachers do that really well, like being able to model how they handle their emotions in, even within like this busy classroom, somebody's, talking over them. Hey, it makes me feel, like not heard when you're not paying attention right now when I'm trying to, share this lesson with you. And so there's a lot of, ways that I feel like emotional connection and recognition of, people being ready to learn is so important.
thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
Great answer there. Another question, unless anyone else has any. You mentioned positive intelligence. How does positive intelligence relate to education, and what role does it play in the learning process?
Yeah, so if people are just starting to use it within schools and with children, because like I said, it came out of studies that from a executive coach working with executives and just seeing how their how their own mental state so affected their performance, and then how as a group it would affect the performance of others, especially if you have like a leader in a group. So it fits really well with the school model, because if you have a teacher, or you can also think of the administrator of the school and then the teachers, if you start there with the adults in the schools really learning how to increase their mental fitness is one way you can put it, like how to really use these different, there's sort of like these mind power games that you can play as a group or with yourself. And some of them are taken from like improv games that you would play, like the yes and game, to try and, think of different solutions to a situation, a problem, where everyone has to say yes and keep building on it, and you're trying to just get as many ideas, not trying to evaluate whether the idea is good yet. Like, that's not the first objective. The first objective is just get as many ideas out there, and then later you can go back and say, oh, okay, well, which one of these is more doable and reasonable. So that's just an example of like having a really creative way of looking at a problem. How do we get there? How do we encourage that? So yeah, I feel like that would be the starting point, and that is what I've starting to see people do, is work as teachers and with administrators. But there are other people who are just now exploring working with teenagers and like showing these improv type games and developing mental fitness as a concept. The creator of this whole concept of positive intelligence, or this researcher, you can look him up on YouTube. He has some TED Talks. His name's Shirzad Shameen. His book is right here. Yeah. And you can go to positiveintelligence.com. There's a lot of science behind it too. And I lost my train of thought there. I was going to share something. Oh, no, that he has said in a few of his speeches how, we spent so much time in school talking about how, I don't even think we spend that much time talking about how to be physically fit, and then, how to learn things or rote facts. But like, how much time do we spend really learning about how our own mind works? And that's kind of where the mental fitness and positive intelligence comes in. So it's just on the frontier of like exploring how do we teach kids that through games and discussions.
Fascinating. Thank you for sharing. Now that makes me think of design thinking. Have you heard of design thinking?
Yeah.
I feel that there's some big similarities between them. A new thing I've heard of is design systems thinking. It's a culmination of design thinking and systems thinking, hence the name. And it's just, ways in which you can solve complex problems. It's very exciting to see all this great work being done. Evolving in Education strives to be a catalyst for positive change and bring together, all of this wisdom and knowledge and share it with the world, essentially. So
I think that's such a great goal, because we don't have to be right in our ways, and it's not going to be just one way.
Yes, exactly. Go ahead. Would you
just a thought that came across my mind. Since most kids that are in schooling, they're in either public or private schools. There are not too many that are homeschooling, especially in developing countries. Developed countries, there are more homeschoolers, but nonetheless, since we're talking about holistic approach where the parents are as involved as the teachers are, if not more, for the kids who are in public schools doing regular curriculums, how can the Montessori approach be brought in at home?
Oh, wait, I thought you were going to ask how can it be brought in at school, but you mean at home?
Yes, because we can't change the schools right away, but we can bring it in at home from parents.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I think it's easier to bring it in at home, and the parent, maybe just has to be a little bit familiar with some of the basics of both of those philosophies of Waldorf and Montessori, but like I said, just the idea of like, you can create a story before teaching a concept that will at least, get the subject started and have children be interested and inspired. Like using the arts and storytelling in a way to teach the curriculum, not just as like a side project, after the worksheets. Yeah, I think
So
that's the main
would
thing.
there be any resources that you could suggest for parents, that would help them, reach the school's objectives but in this more creative way?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, there are. I mean, there's so many. I'm just trying to think, like, what would I say off the top of my head? Like for Montessori, there's definitely some great websites that if you look up like Montessori curriculum, I don't know if you would even put in like for the home um or like free Montessori curriculum, because there's a lot of things that are available as printouts. Um, so that's a great way for the parents to learn. There is a lot available. And the same for Waldorf, like just to get an idea, there's like I used to follow on Pinterest, like different Waldorf education posts, and a little like Waldorf homeschool people who are doing either podcasts or blogs. And that was, that's a good way to just kind of get ideas, especially if you have, if you're teaching at home and you have a topic that you want to do, like let's say you're going to do plant biology. And so then you can just look up like plant biology at Waldorf and plant biology Montessori, and then just see ways that you can combine those.
So I guess it would be objective based, what learning objectives the schools are working on. We could probably search, you're saying, for the methodology to bring out those objectives with Waldorf or Montessori as well.
Right.
Uh,
Yes.
in your combined approach, have is that available as well?
Um, like I said, I've known just a few people who've done that. I should look for what Carmen Gamper is doing right now. And I know she had written a book, and it wasn't necessarily Waldorf, but it did, have that like similar, very, very similar effect.
So I guess what I'm basically trying to get at is, how do we make it actionable? Because we can't change the schooling system overnight, but we can make the changes at home, and
Yes.
that's what would make the change actionable. And then through eventually through your parent teacher associations and everything, that there may be an evolution that comes about as well.
Yes, that's a great question. And I think that's why I have been so attracted to working with homeschoolers for most of my career, because yeah, you can just get in the trenches and do it right away. Um, and I've done some unschooling and helped other families to do unschooling, and that's that's kind of, I don't know. I think it's such a growing movement because it can flow naturally. Like you can, like you said, watch your child, and then also, with talking to them and keeping a journal about like what their interests are, and then helping them develop those interests in different ways. So actionable items, it's like, yeah, finding what your child's learning style is, and yeah, it's a whole exploration from there of how to teach and how to just go on this learning journey together. Yeah. Some students need a lot more like physical activity, and I love to recommend things like teaching reading through doing hopscotch. Like you can just have the letters on chalk there and have them jump to the different letters and say the sounds, and yeah, there's just so many ways.
That is so cool. I'm gonna try that with my kids. We have chalk outside, so that's great. Thank you, Elvira. I have another question. In your opinion, what are the most pressing challenges and exciting opportunities in education today, and how can we address them effectively?
Yeah, there's a couple, but I guess what stands out is like what I was talking about before about assessment. I feel like that's one area that parents and educators and a lot of community members could join on and say, like, we want to explore different ways of having assessment for our kids, because I feel like that really affects the, the school environment and the learning. That really affects the teachers, when they're like, oh, well, we're going to be tested in this way on this thing. And I don't know for how it is like for the schools there where your daughters are going. But like with the schools that I work with that are homeschoolers, but still in a public school setting or under a public school umbrella, I should say, they're testing like at least 3 times a year within the school, and then another fourth, state testing, the SBAC type. So yeah, I feel like we need to change our mind about the testing, the value of it, the value of these results that, oh, now you have this data, now you can, create your curriculum, what you're going to teach around this data. But just to me, it's like the day that the student took that test and the mood that they were in when they took it is going to, like, it's not necessarily going to show you the data that's really relevant next week, even for that child. So that's like my least favorite part of education. And the thing that I feel like needs to change the most is our views of assessment and the value of it, and how can we do it differently.
Evolving education strives to address the misalignment of assessment. We aim to use neuroscience tools to measure success, and like interactive games and rethinking, because standardized testing has been proven to not accurately measure, much of anything, just except for rote memorization, which isn't beneficial.
Yeah, and a lot of students, because they're doing it so much, they just start to not care about it as much. And so then the results are skewed because of that, because kids are just like, all right, I'm just not really putting my true effort into this test.
Yes, and they get discouraged, if they see that they don't know something, they get discouraged. I was watching a video the other day online, and it was this classroom in which they didn't raise their hands because, let's say the teacher asks a question, somebody raises their hand instantly, just because the other children didn't think of it in the first 3 or first second doesn't mean they're not going to come to the answer. But when they see someone else's hand shoot up in record time, they think, oh, well, there's no need for me to even think of the answer because they've already got it. So instead of the children raising their hands, everybody, when the teacher asks a question, everybody puts their hand on their stomach, on their abdomen, and if they know the answer, they put their thumb up. So the teacher's looking, and the teacher can see, thumb up or down if they know the answer like this. But the other students, they don't. It doesn't catch your eye, and they go, oh, well, they've already got it, and I didn't, so I must not be that smart. So there's a lot of things that we can and must do differently with all of this. It's fascinating to see all the research being done. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, I'd also like to add that we're changing from pedagogy to what we call now heutagogy, which is self-learning. And if we introduce that also into pedagogy, then for assessments, you can also start to consider things like peer reviews, where kids are reviewing each other, and I think that would be a very good change in the way we assess ourselves, rather being, trying to reach a benchmark set by an adult. The benchmark is set by the children itself. And
Mm.
but apart from that, one of the major challenges I think the education industry faces is the concentration on the cognitive domain, where schools are just dealing with the curriculum based on what they want to cover, in the cognitive domain. They're not touching upon the affective domain. They might have something to do with psychomotor as well, but uh, we're too uh, we're too focused on knowledge-based learning rather
Mm.
than emotional or life skills or anything else. So I think how we regard education, you see so many kids saying these days, "Oh, we don't need the maths that we've learned. We're never going to use it." Uh, I had a kid the other day talk about the shape of the rhombus, and he's saying the only time I've seen the shape of a rhombus is in a Indian sweet called the barfi. So so it's the kids think they're doing things they will never use, and they are aware of that fact. They don't know how to, and they're losing how to interact with each other. They're losing connection. They're losing the importance of relationships and how to
Mm.
manage relationships. None of this is being taught. We see it fading away. We see our kids losing these abilities, but we don't see any change happening in the curriculum in schools about it.
Mm. Yeah, I mean,
So I think,
I have seen some initiatives to do it, but yeah, it's not so fast. And yeah, that's definitely should be a
and
big
there's a huge
focus.
difference between the developed and developing countries. So where you may have seen the
Mm.
changes happening would be in a developed country. In a developing
Mm.
country, we're far behind. If
Mm.
you, for example, in India, if I've sent in a correction for a curriculum textbook, it can take up to 10 to, and just a spelling error, in a prescribed textbook, it can take up to 15 years for that change to happen over here.
Wow.
So getting things to change in a developing country is a huge challenge. And in a developed country,
Mm.
it's much easier because the people are more aware, more progressive, uh, looking at newness to bring in uh, new ways of doing things
Mm.
because they have already seen the change coming.
Mm. Yeah, that's an
So
interesting perspective.
yeah, I think it's important to look at the difference between developed and developing countries when we're talking about education, especially because there is a lot of difference.
Oh, great points. Thank you. Yes,
Mm.
there's a stark difference. I can't believe that 10 to 15 years. Wow. I really love what you're saying about the student kind of peer reviewing. And I know that can kind of foster intrinsic motivation, let's say through a bit of perhaps collaborative competition and whatnot. As part of our research and data analysis with EIE is going to be student surveys, teacher surveys, looking
Mm.
at the feedback. And this comprehensive strategy will allow us to refine our educational interventions, enhance teacher effectiveness, and create a positive and enduring impact on student learning outcomes, performance, and overall classroom dynamics. Because the problem we're facing, we're facing it all over the world. It's not just here, it's not just there. It's apathetic, I believe. There's apathy within the schools, be it the teachers, the students, the administrators, the parents. There's a lot of apathy, unfortunately, and we must ignite that intrinsic motivation, love for teaching. The teachers' love for their vocation and a lifelong love for learning, and through, innovative approaches which are accessible to everyone. We can do that. We can tap into their intrinsic motivation. It's just we're the age we're in right now is it's both exciting and terrifying, where we are and where we could be, where we're going. We must evolve. We have all the tools, all the resources, all the knowledge. We must stand upon the shoulders of giants, which we are very much doing, taking the wisdom and knowledge of those who have gone before us, combining it and informing it with everything we have, with neuroscience tools, with developmental psychology, cognitive psychology, with every technology we have, every resource available. So that's our mission with Evolving in Education. And I talk to people and they're terrified about the future, and I just assure everyone, I'm like, it's okay. It's looking grim, but there's a solution, and we're working on it.
Yes, and I do agree with Karen Beer that the relationships, like I think that can really help to overcome the apathy when you know that you have a place where you belong and where people care about you, and like that can be such an important part of a school community.
Yes, connection. Connection is huge. Well, I thank you guys all so much for joining. I would like to be mindful of everyone's time. So does anyone have anything further they would like to share, ask, or add? No? Well,
I would just add in just to appreciate everybody being here. And it seems like we talked about this type of stuff before, how because we're moving toward the population is moving towards these little sound bites, like meeting everybody where they're at, is just such a viable thought, right? Like the information that we're sharing even here, how and I loved Karen Beer's that question where you were asking how you can apply it to homeschooling. Everybody needs some of these technologies, and even just little bits. I love how Amber is throwing out ideas that's come from other meetings, because if one little piece can incite you to change your behavior with a child and spark that additional umph for that child, then that just makes the world a difference. So I appreciate everybody being here and sharing that. It only takes one little thing, right? One little thing. You never know.
That's exactly a good reminder. Yeah, you never know, like when you just say one little thing, it could change a whole person's life.
It's so helpful. Thank you, guys.
ripple effect.
Yes, the ripple effect is
Yeah,
good.
generational change as well is what it's going to be. It's not going to be overnight, like you were saying, Karen. It's going to be a generational change. But just look forward to, I'm happy and honored to be part of it. And I think the future's looking bright. I think with the amount of knowledge out there in the world, if we could just gather it and disseminate it widely, don't charge people for it, just give it away for free, make it fun, make it exciting, interactive, engaging. Got it made. All right. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Amber.
I look forward to seeing you all next time, and have a wonderful evening.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye.
Yeah.